This is my farm on the flat map, and I'm going to spend a whole 100 days here. Our goal is to achieve great success and build the perfect farm. Today, we're buying new equipment and starting silage production. All of this is to boost our income. If you're interested, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Waking up in the morning, I looked outside. It was March. That meant today marked the 18th day of our progress on the flat map. Today we would primarily focus on silage production. Of course, for that, we needed to build a silage pit. I had already picked a great spot, right behind our equipment shed. So, without wasting time, I switched to construction mode and got to work. First, I cleared the area of grass that was in the way, and then I installed the silage pit. It cost a little over $4,000, and for now, it should be enough. Next, I had to build an access road so the tractor could easily drive in and unload grass. In the end, we created a small but convenient area for silage production. With that done, it was time to start filling the pit. First, we needed to cut a sufficient amount of grass. I got into the tractor, attached the mower, and headed to the hayfield. This time, I decided to mow just a small amount of grass to test how much we could earn and whether it was even worth spending too much time on it. After mowing, I needed to collect the grass. To make the process easier, I used a windrower, which neatly arranged the grass into rows for easier collection. Once everything was ready, I realized that we needed more modern equipment. Picking up grass manually with a pitchfork was no longer efficient. So, I set the windrower aside and headed to the store. There, I found a suitable forage pickup, which cost a little over $2,500. Since we already had a trailer, there was no point in buying another one. With the new equipment purchased, I returned to the farm, detached the pickup, and worked on modifying the trailer. I needed to adapt it for transporting grass, and while I was at it, I decided to increase its capacity by adding side extensions. Now, the trailer could hold up to 9 cubic meters of different crops, which was quite impressive. While I was making these upgrades, it started to rain, but that didn't stop me from working. I hooked up the equipment and headed to the field to collect the grass. The new pickup made the process significantly easier and faster. Within just a couple of minutes, our upgraded trailer was completely full. If I had used a pitchfork, this would have taken much longer. Next, I headed to the silage pit to unload the grass. That's when I realized that to open the trailer's side gates, the tractor needed to be directly attached. That meant I had to disconnect the pickup each time and then reattach the trailer to the tractor. This took up some extra time, but it was still much faster than loading everything manually with a pitchfork. After collecting all the remaining grass, I ended up with another 1.5 trailer loads, which I also dumped into the silage pit. Now, all that was left was to compact the silage and cover it with plastic, so the fermentation process could begin. I got into the tractor and carefully drove over the forage multiple times to pack it down. Once everything was properly compacted, I returned all the equipment to its designated spots. Since there was no more space under the main shelter, I had to park the tractor under the hay storage shed. Only then did I remember that I had forgotten to cover the silage with plastic. So, I had to go back and seal it properly. With that done, all that was left was to wait for the silage to fully ferment. In the meantime, I could finally take a well-earned break, which is exactly what I did. 2 days passed, and our silage was fully ready for sale. However, there was one problem. We needed a way to load it. I decided to buy a shovel and load the silage into the trailer manually. I hopped into the tractor, attached the trailer, and headed to the store to get the necessary tool. The shovel was quite cheap, only $26. I tossed it into the trailer and drove back to the silage pit. Once I arrived, I grabbed the shovel and started loading silage into the trailer, bit by bit. This was a slow job, so it took some time. But in the end, after filling the trailer completely, I was ready to head off and sell it. Arriving at the selling point, I opened the trailer's gate and unloaded our silage. As a result, we earned just over $3,000, which was quite good considering the low time investment and the fact that the price wasn't even the best. I started thinking this was actually a pretty profitable business. Maybe it was worth expanding silage production on a larger scale. But first, I had to sell the remaining silage. While loading the next batch, I noticed that quite a bit of forage had spilled outside the silage pit. This had happened because, during the compaction process, some of the material had been pushed out. Not wanting to waste any resources, I grabbed the shovel, collected the scattered forage, and then got back into the tractor to head for another sale. Just like last time, we earned a little over $3,000 for a full trailer, bringing our total income to nearly $9,000. That was an excellent result, especially considering that all of this silage had been produced from just a small hay harvest. On my way back to the farm, I decided that since silage production was proving to be so profitable, it should become our main focus. Since our baler was now unnecessary, I decided to sell it and use the money to build a larger silage pit and buy better equipment. Selling the baler brought in almost $9,000, bringing our total balance to around $18,000. On my way home, I thought about the fact that our silage pit was already nearly half filled with forage from the last batch. That meant the smartest approach would be to completely fill it up, sell all the silage at once, and then demolish it to build a much larger one. This idea seemed pretty solid to me. So when I arrived at the farm, I attached the mower to the tractor and headed to the hayfield. After mowing, I windrowed the grass, collected it, and dumped it into the silage pit. The next step was compaction. After carefully compacting everything, we ended up with just over 14,000 liters of forage. I covered the pit with plastic, hopped into the tractor, and parked all the equipment in its proper place. Because for today, the work was done. Fermentation would take some time, so until it was ready, I could finally take a well-earned break. Another 2 days passed, and our silage was ready for sale once again. However, when I got into the tractor, I noticed that the fuel was almost empty. That meant I had to go buy some diesel. I figured there was just enough fuel left to make it to the store, so I headed there. At the store, I noticed that I could purchase a fuel barrel for only $280. That seemed like a great option, so I bought it. Then I drove up to the barrel and refueled the tractor. With a full tank, I returned to the farm and prepared to transport the silage. Just like last time, I pulled up to the silage pit with the trailer, grabbed the shovel, and started loading. After filling the first trailer, I took it to sell, earning a little over $3,000. Selling the remaining silage brought our balance to just over $22,000. Now it was time to build a new, larger silage pit to replace the old one. First, I sold the old pit for $2,000. Then I decided to construct a cement pit for $12,500, which would be able to hold much more forage. In addition, I built an access road leading to the new pit. Once construction was complete, I had to move the spilled forage into the new silage pit. Grabbing the shovel once again, I got to work. After transferring everything, it was finally time to start filling the new pit. The first step was cutting a massive amount of grass, so I got into the tractor, attached the mower, and headed to the hayfield. This hayfield turned out to be truly massive. There was more than enough grass to completely fill the new pit. The mowing process itself took a lot of time. By 5 o'clock in the evening, I had managed to cut most of it, but since it was getting dark, I decided to stop for the day. I parked all the equipment in its designated spots and went to rest, ready to continue working tomorrow. The next day, heavy rain fell, forcing me to wait until it stopped. According to the forecast, the rain was expected to end by 10 o'clock. Sure enough, once the rain stopped, I resumed mowing the grass. After some time, the mowing was finally completed. There was a lot of grass, so I wasted no time and immediately attached the windrower to gather it into neat rows for easier transportation to the silage pit. A few hours later, all the grass had been neatly arranged into rows. However, during the process, I realized an important issue. Our silage pit had only one entrance. This meant that maneuvering the trailer inside would be inconvenient, and with side unloading, stacking the grass evenly inside the pit would be extremely difficult. To fix this, I headed to the store to look for a more suitable trailer, preferably one with rear unloading. At the store, I found a trailer priced at $13,000 that could hold 12 cubic meters. Luckily, we had just enough money, so I decided to buy it. It met all our requirements and even had a larger capacity than our previous trailer, which should speed up grass transportation significantly. I attached the new trailer to the tractor and headed back to the hayfield. There, I hooked up the forage pickup and began collecting the grass. But immediately, I ran into a serious problem. Because of its larger size, the new trailer was taller than the previous one, and the forage pickup simply couldn't reach its bed. That meant I couldn't load grass into it. To be honest, at that moment, I was really frustrated. At first, I considered modifying the trailer in our workshop, but the upgrade would cost $2,000, and we didn't have that much money at the moment. So I had no choice but to return to the store and sell the trailer. I managed to get a little over $11,000 for it, and then started looking for a new option. This time, I took all my previous mistakes into account and picked a trailer for $9,000. However, it had a smaller capacity, only 8 cubic meters. But we didn't have a choice, so I had to take it. I hooked it up to the tractor, returned to the farm, and resumed collecting the grass. Since the new trailer was smaller, I had to unload it frequently, which significantly increased the time needed to complete the job. However, the one positive aspect was that now we could easily unload forage directly at the back of the silage pit, ensuring a much more efficient distribution inside. Since we had a large amount of forage, I made sure to thoroughly compact the mass after each unloading to fit as much as possible into the silage pit. By the time I had transported about half of the grass from the hayfield, the sun was already starting to set. On top of that, I was exhausted from the day's work, so I decided to pause and get some rest. Tomorrow, I would finish transporting the remaining grass and prepare the silage pit for fermentation. It was already the 24th day of our progress, and I continued working in the hayfield, finishing the transportation of all the grass. Once everything had been delivered, I parked the forage pickup and trailer in their designated spots. Then, I got into the tractor and headed to the silage pit to compact the forage. As I drove back and forth, the mass gradually became denser, but at one point, while climbing onto the pile of forage, my tractor bottomed out and got stuck. It refused to move, so I had to grab a shovel and dig out the wheels to free it. After clearing away all the obstructing forage, I got back into the driver's seat and resumed compacting. This time, I was much more careful to avoid getting stuck again. Since we had a large amount of forage, the compaction process took quite a bit of time. However, I eventually managed to complete it, and our forage was fully packed down. The only thing left to do was cover it with plastic. In the end, we had a little over 110,000 liters of forage, an impressive amount, and I was very pleased with the result. This volume would allow allow us to earn a significant sum. Now, all that was left was to wait for the forage to go through the fermentation process and turn into silage. Additionally, since we had so much of it, I wanted to sell it at the best possible price. So I decided to wait until the price per 1,000 liters reached its peak. By the time that happened, the silage would be fully ready. So I went to rest while keeping an eye on market prices. Exactly 1 year later, the price of silage was at a level I was completely satisfied with, so I decided to sell it. Since the volume was enormous, loading it manually didn't make sense. So I headed to the store and purchased an auger conveyor. After hooking it up to the tractor, I drove to our silage pit. Once everything was set up, I started loading silage into the trailer. Thanks to the auger, the process was much faster and more efficient. After filling the first trailer, I headed to the selling point. It earned me nearly $3,000, which was quite a decent sum. I spent the rest of the day transporting silage for sale. By the time the silage pit was completely emptied, our balance had grown by $43,000, which was a fantastic result and made me very happy. We have now spent 36 days on this flat map, and I think this is a great place to wrap up for today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. See you all next time.